Hi, Roger Sharmer.
Art Sadony, Brother Joe. Joe Sadony.
Joe Sadony, okay. We're here at the Valley of the Pines, and it is Saturday, August 2, and we're going to take a walk through the grounds and the property to more understand about the place. Meanwhile, you can see the other buildings on the hill, and I don't know, Art, the lower one is?
Grandfather's office.
And up to the left is the chapel. To the right?
To the right was great-grandma's house, later to be the print shop.
Okay.
Now that is currently where I'm living.
Okay. And then the main house is where Professor Joe and his wife lived, and then you were, you two were raised?
And I grew up there.
You were raised there,
yeah.
right, yeah, okay. And main garage over here, or?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, let's take a walk up the house, and we'll check out things from there.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the main house where Professor Joe lived. You were raised, and I love what you said, Joe, because basically it's like this is the ceremonial front door, but everybody else uses the back door. There's something about White Lake where you always end up going in the back door rather than the front door.
Right.
Because the front porch faces the lake and the back door faces the road where you come in. Okay, I think, and then from here you get an idea of, you look down through over Sadony Bayou, and then you look on towards Old Channel Inn. You look on to Old Channel Inn and obviously Lake Michigan, and there's the lawn down below. Okay, so you were raised in this house. Was it still furnished with things that your, Professor Joe would have had, or did your parents more personalize it, or?
A little of both.
Was it like living in a museum, or what?
Mm-hmm. Great memories.
Okay.
This is
all good.
Paradise for kids to grow up.
Yeah, okay.
Half the neighborhood kids lived here.
I was just going to say that. Everybody came over, called mom and dad, and just loved coming over.
Lake Michigan, swimming?
5-minute walk.
Yeah. And then there's also those wonderful photo albums where it shows different people from your, Professor Joe, I'll call him, where they're going to the dunes or they're walking through the dunes and walking along the beach. And the proximity to Lake Michigan is just like right over there kind of thing. It's a great spot, yeah.
My full name is Arthur Joseph Sadony. Date of birth is April 14th, 1909. Well, many years ago, my dad was in Chicago, and he pictured a place that he'd like to settle down, and he visioned it in Michigan, near water, near Lake Michigan, and he drew a diagram of it. He wanted these pines and a place to grow things, and he came up along the lake, and he sent a description of it to different real estate men all along up through this area. And he came up on a friend of his. They came up and they camped across the lake near where the lion's den is, and he felt it was someplace around here. And from his description he sent out to different real estate people, he got a letter from a man in Montague. He said, I have a place that just perfectly describes, that you described, it fits it perfectly, but it's not for sale. And Dad had been saving up money for a long time to buy this, and he had all of $3,500 in the bank, hoping to buy this place when he found it. So Dad said, well, he says, if it fits description, he says, wire the man and ask him what he'll take for it cash. So the man's name was Pryor in Montague, the real estate man. So he wired this man and asked him if he wanted to sell and what he would take for the place cash. The man wired back, he says he didn't really want to sell it, but if someone was interested, he would take $3,500 cash for it. Dad says, I'll take it. He sent him the money, and moved up there with his horses in the carriage from Chicago and settled it over at the valley, we call the Valley of the Pines.
Hey, I'm walking up this. This is kind of a great for winter time. How did you handle that?
We'd get in our sleds and we'd slide down here over and over and over.
I mean, I'm thinking.
When it was slippery,
in the summertime, it was the Red Flyer wagon.
Right, wagons.
Okay, so the dog house is over there, the dog run, which is gone. And then this was the, what again?
Workshop.
Workshop, okay.
Which still needs work, as we all can see.
Okay. Was this like a sundial or something out here?
The sundial.
Okay. Yeah, I can see where it's at. Oh, here it is. A little pattern. Huh.
We had a little playhouse that sat right here.
Okay.
That's still sitting out back, but my mom had the spike taken out.
Okay.
For fear of us falling on it and getting hurt.
Okay. So this has been here a long time.
That's been there a long time.
Everything has a story, so the wheel is the story of...
Roses used to grow on it.
Really?
Birds used to grow all the way up side of our playhouse.
Same as this one here.
Same as that room.
Okay,
But it was
okay.
over here.
But they probably came off an old wagon from the place.
Oh, I'm sure.
Farther,
Okay,
farther
okay.
back, yeah.
Because one of you who was telling me the story about like when he, or was it Art, where in that tape, where he's going to town and he meets Dowie, and Joe has a better trotter horse than Dowie, and then Dowie wants to buy the trotter horse.
I think the first time he met him, we had horses at that time, and we had a real fine trotter horse. And Dad was going downtown to get something, groceries and all. And Dowie came out with his horse. And just as they came by, and he tried to get ahead of Dad, and Dad let ours go, and he ran away from him. He just left him behind. And when he finally did catch up from him, he says, "I want to buy that horse," he says. "I'll give you I think he said $75 or something like that for him," which is a lot of money those. Dad says he's not for sale. I think that's the first meeting Dad had with him.
With the Reverend.
Yeah.
Okay, and then actually from here we get a shot of the chapel up on the hill. Which I suppose raises the question also, is like, was Professor Joe a great spiritualist, or Jesus, God, and all that stuff?
He was very religious. He studied every religion in the world.
Right.
I'd say more spiritualist.
Yeah, a little of both.
A little of both.
We had a little chapel up in his office, the back part of his office. And we had a chapel in there. We had all decorated with arborvitae around the sides. And we had an organ there, a little organ.
These represent the Valley of the Pines.
Right.
Valley coming in on each side.
Okay.
Little pine trees. And
Okay.
He made those himself.
Okay. Yeah, because there was so much more creativity that somehow happened here all the time, whether it's Jacques de Frege and the Prince and metalwork and on and on and on.
In fact, there's 11 buildings over there in the valley.
You're kidding.
Yeah, there was two of them, two regular big houses. Well, the one we lived in, and the other, some friends that lived in this were Charlie Abel, that came with Dad originally. He lived over there. Then Meredith Byers lived over there. Jack DeFrege lived there. And this man and his woman, man and wife, St. Clair, they lived there. So then we built, Dad had an office and a library, and then he built a place for his mother way back back in the late teens.
The basic core of the house.
1837.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't quote me on that. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I've heard.
So you're working with some
Old field
Old
stone
fields, yeah,
foundation.
yeah.
2 huge roofs plus this roof. Everything dumps here. There's nowhere for it to go
That was always about an every 8-year project here.
to redrive the well.
In the cellar,
In the
we had to
cellar.
drive a new well about every 8 years. We had to pull the old point up, put a new point on, and hand drive it because the ceilings are this high.
The cellar was dug
Hand drive
in.
it.
There was not a cellar originally.
No, they dug that
By
by
hand.
hand underneath the building.
So when you go in the cellar, you're walking around like this to drive
And
the
they
well.
put the pump and the well right down in the middle of the cellar.
So you're pounding 3-foot sections of pipe at a time by hand.
I remember.
I,
Very well remember.
and the house was much smaller. The upstairs was like a half upstairs.
Yeah.
So it would have been maybe like a 2-story wing with a 1-story wing?
Kind of like the kickouts were added. It was just a farmhouse,
Right,
a square,
okay.
smaller farmhouse. And where the roses are up there, the kitchen was out away from the house. Their theory was if you burn the kitchen down, you don't burn the whole house down.
You don't burn the house down, right?
I think his vision was from the pines over there, because those are all the,
Yeah,
the
point,
west
Joe.
side. They're all giants.
Yeah.
You
Pine
don't
trees,
see those.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought the story was something about those. Dad said was they were too small to cut when all the logging happened of the white pine.
So they got left.
And those are some of those. I had to have a couple removed by my house, and they were over 120 foot.
Well,
Yeah, that is, yeah. But the way they taper down each
Shows
way.
that.
right, right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Pines, Valley of the Pines, yeah.
Matter of fact, then the log cabin used to be over there, or over,
This used to sit about just behind where that little apple tree is.
yeah, kind
But
of
it was
marshy.
sinking into the mud.
Marshy, right, right. Okay, let's go check out the log cabin. Art, you said this was located over there by the marsh earlier.
Next to the garage, kind of on an angle.
Okay, and kind of filtering away, and
It was
so
sinking into the mud,
Yeah.
and I attempt to save it. It did make it up there in one piece. It still needs some shoring up.
okay. But I think it kind of expresses the creativity of the whole group that lived here, and kind of attitudes towards things. Well, tell us something about the cabin and where it came from. Who created it? Who made it?
They built that. Grandpa, Dad, and Uncle Art built that. Do you recall the year?
I don't recall the year, but I know after they cut the logs, I think they did it in 7 days.
Okay, so that's all.
Dad say in the 7 days they built
7
that.
days.
So it's all local
All cut out
materials.
here.
And then, like, the date line would have been on that.
I would guess the 20s.
That's what I was thinking.
20s,
probably the
okay.
20s, yeah.
Yeah, then all.
We used to camp in that as kids too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Dad built a couple bunks in there for us. And
so it's kind of a playhouse.
Yeah,
Kind
kinda.
of playhouse thing, yeah.
So Abe
mice
Lincoln.
and red squirrels out of it.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. And then the cannon. The cannon's interesting. The story on that.
How it got here, I cannot tell you
Okay.
because I don't know.
Okay.
But there is a plaque on there, and it came from Marshalltown, Iowa.
Okay.
Had to do with the first celebration of the 4th of July for that town
Okay.
in 1865.
Okay. Okay. So has the cannon always sat there?
It used to sit directly in front of the cabin down in that location.
Okay.
It was sinking into the mud as well.
Okay.
So that got moved up here.
The other symbolic thing about the cannon is that, like, I'm a kayaker, you know, and so I'll kayak down to Kim and Mary McGee's, Murray's Inn. You're there. It's Labor Day. It's 6 o'clock on Labor Day, and the question is, are they going to fire the cannons, kind of thing? And there's, you can hear the kaboom, kaboom, kind of thing. You can hear it over at Murray's, and they always refer to it. That's when the trunk slammers are leaving, meaning the resorters. The summer people are gone on Labor Day, and that's the whole thing, right? It's like the natives reclaiming the land, kind of a thing.
That's always been our little joke about it. Yes, yes.
Yeah, interesting. So how did you pick this up?
I rented a big Skytrack,
Okay,
brought it in and picked it up out of the mud, carried
Okay.
it up here, and got it set in place.
it's really amazing, the intricacy of the door and things like that.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great that you're preserving it.
It's all sassafras, the door.
Oh, okay,
The
all
bark
right,
doesn't fall off,
sassafras. do all that elaborate woodwork on the door. Fascinating, yeah. It's also, I mean, anybody who has an old piece of property knows that every morning you wake up, there's an hour's worth of work to do, if not more, just to keep the thing going. And so I would imagine that, you wake up there, look down here and say, oh, it's today the day I'm going to work on the log cabin, and somehow the pump broke, so you fix the pump that day or something.
There's always a risk.
Yeah, it's always amazing. Okay, well, let's take a walk on down. We'll go back towards maybe where the barn was.
Okay.
Okay, and then Art, this was where,
This is where the barn stood.
and the barn was a big two-story building, one-story, what?
2-story. The hay was in the top, of course, in the hay
Okay.
loft, and the horses, the cows
Okay.
were housed in there.
So then, okay, then like chickens, I mean, obviously we're talking self-sufficiency, like chickens would be where?
Chickens, where did they keep the chickens? When we grew up, it
When
was
we
over
grew up,
here.
it was over there. When I would assume they had them out here somewhere
Probably in the barn area somewhere.
or running around.
Okay. And then you mentioned earlier, like there was the farm, which was the land more in the marshland over there, where they grew crops.
The vegetables and things were out in there, which is all swamp now.
Right, right.
Hay was out up above, out back here.
Okay. Okay, well, let's walk on. And then the other house, the big old brown shingle house, used to be back here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back there. So this was the big kind of two-story brown shingle house that other people lived in, right?
Yes.
And that it was here originally before the other house, or this came afterwards?
I thought it was here
When Grandpa bought it.
when Grandpa bought it, yes.
Okay. So there would have been the original farmhouse here and then the other brown shingle back here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then this came down when? Just recently?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay, and then the building behind is for, or was?
That's where my dad raised champion boxers.
Okay, boxer dogs, okay. And then you mentioned that in front of that was the ice house,
Ice house.
where they would have gathered ice from White Lake to store during, I suppose they got it out of Indian Bay then, right?
Indian Bay area.
Yeah.
And then they would sell the ice during the summer to locals
Oh, okay.
before refrigerators.
Okay, right, ice boxes, right. Yeah. And then the funny little building over there, it looks like a playhouse.
That's the playhouse I spoke of that used to sit next to the sundial.
Oh, okay, up there, right.
I just didn't have the heart to.
Right. It's a forthcoming project.
Well, yes,
Yes,
yes.
right, okay. And then where it goes into meadow back there is just kind of like where the civilized portion stopped, or was there more farms
That's
back
the
there?
beginning of the woods. That was hay for the horses where they'd grow hay out there. and
Okay.
Same up above.
The story I have about Joe Sadony is that like it's during World War II and the war is going on, and it's a wintry day, and I have a buddy, LD, and so we're going to go out, we'd get the hell out of the house, go outside and do something. So it's like get out and play or whatever. So there's like in front of the house, an old channel trail, there's a road, and then it goes down to the woods over the hill. And so we thought we will throw grenades at cars, as active soldiers would throw grenades at tanks. And so we're down there, and a couple cars go by, and we sort of lob the snowballs up, and the cars keep going, and everything's fine. And so, okay, we're getting made some snowballs, and we're ready for the next hit. The next hit comes along, and it's sort of this big kind of strange car, all right? But we didn't really know, so we fire the snowballs, and then you duck down in the drift of the snowball kind of thing, like in the snow, and that's that. And so what we didn't know is that the guy who was in the car went around the block and then came back and stopped directly in front of us on top, right?
Nice.
And it's this big old kind of Norma Desmond Sunset Boulevard kind of house, or car, And so we're there, and all of a sudden, and then this monumental figure said, boys, I want to tell you what you're doing is very dangerous and you may hurt somebody. And there was a driver and then he was sitting in the back, right? And so then we're like, oh my God, what is that? Who is that? But he was dressed like, Joseph Sadony, the pants, the whatever. And so he gets back in the car, the motor kind of continues on, and the driver drives away. And that's my meeting Professor Joseph Sadony. It's a weird story. But obviously it's like, wow, who is that?
Did you ever throw snowballs again?
I was just going to ask
I think we kind of kicked it out for the day. Yeah, it was over.
Lesson learned.
But the interesting thing was that, like, what he didn't do was like, like, I'm going to go tell your parents, and then they will scold you or reprimand you. But basically, he just said, this is the way it is. It's dangerous. You shouldn't be doing that. And there was no report to our parents and things like that. Curious.
Made you think about it.
Better way to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of curious because, like, everywhere you look, you find a project or you find some things. Michigan, 68. Michigan, 66. We go back to 56 here. RD, here's another 66. This one is sort of not legible, but not sure what it is. But then also, just, I don't know, the tools. And, I don't know, Joe, like, look at that wrench. I mean, that is a big mother. And then obviously they're continual, because he was a tinker, an inventor, and a creative guy. So obviously this would mean something for making something which would do something, right?
Yeah.
Those are oilers off of old machines. This is an ice blade.
Oh, okay, for ice.
Lake
Wow.
and cut them into blocks for the old ice refrigerators.
Fingernail file?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Interesting stuff. All right, let's go. Well, also this funny thing here, obviously for holding something, right?
Yep. Horseshoes, or it was in the blacksmith shop.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
This was the building right here.
Then also, and the door is?
Probably burned up.
Looks like it was burned up.
Okay.
The youngest first.
This is the exaggeration. Look at the seeds. You've been feeding things here.
Bird feeder.
Or the bird feeder, yeah. Hey, then what's this cage?
If I remember right, didn't they have the raccoons in there? Yeah.
Raccoons?
And if you dug down, they had a clay tile about as big around as a basketball going back into the hill, and that's where they'd stay. There's an underground coop,
Really?
so to speak. Yeah.
So why would you have raccoons?
I have no idea back then.
Huh. Okay, let's go check out the study. This is the back of the main house here. And wonderful collection of outbuildings. So here we are with, actually, it's kind of interesting. There's like a brick foundation, yellow brick, almost like Chicago brick, and then the Sadony blocks on top.
Yes.
And then this was his study. And was that a chimney over there?
The lower, yes, that's a chimney. The lower half that you see the old bricks was the root cellar
Oh, okay.
that was here when he came.
Right,
Where they'd
right.
store all their fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
And the blocks you see on top were added on.
Made here.
Made for his study.
Right. And then the access would have been up through here?
Up through here and in the side, yes.
Okay, okay. And then the big speaker?
The big speaker, what I hear, was acquired off of some ship out of Muskegon, and he would just play music over that.
Okay. Hey, it's interesting looking also at the boards that come out. They come out straight, and then how they're flared at the corner there.
Isn't that interesting?
Interesting detail.
I love that.
Yeah. Also some Virginia creeper growing up there. Okay, let's walk a little more over here. And so this was his study, and that's like where he would write, or?
He would write. Did some of his experiments in there. He did a lot of research on magnetism and electricity. Yeah.
During the war, they were chased for 3 days with a submarine. They just go in circles, no light. They couldn't communicate, couldn't use radio, couldn't do anything. So Dad says, well, he says, it seems there's some other way you can go with the communication. So we started working on something like that, and we developed where you talk over a light beam. We had either a flashlight or a spotlight. And we'd pick it up over here, and you'd pick up your mic on the light beam. And you could talk back and forth on just a light beam. And Dad said, well, pretty hard to see it, but you can see it. So we did it with a black light. You couldn't see it. So he went to J. Edgar Hoover through this friend of ours, and he says, I'll take it down there. And he took it down there and ran to the government and gave it to him to use all the information, the drawings and everything else on him.
And the government used that then.
Yeah.
The Second World War was your father's invention, which was a gift to this country.
Yeah, that was almost like radar, you know.
Well, exactly. Like
Yeah.
radar. Yeah, and this was all done while he was in Montague, Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
Here in
Oh, yeah.
Montague, Michigan.
Right.
The fluorescent bulbs, I think it was, if I remember right, there's wire,
Right here. Came through these wires.
and the wire would carry power, and without a wire being attached to the things other than connecting the two, it would go right through and light them up. When it worked, remember Dad would plug this in,
Yep.
and it sends electricity,
Somehow.
static, energy, whatever. And you would take these, I guess you'd put it at the back side of it, wasn't it over this?
Yep.
And it would pick the electricity up through that little spot. Flame of the sun, it would look like.
Northern Lights. And wouldn't you could pick up a light bulb and it would light up in your hand?
I think so, yeah.
Man. It still works. That was a recorder that had round paper discs and little pencil drawers that would record temperature, humidity. It would do a complete revolution in 24 hours. And he was doing a study on weather, gravity, magnetism, and he would record all this data. And that was one of his studies he did.
Hitting the sand,
Okay.
that's what it is.
When lightning hit the sand.
And it turned it to glass.
One color would be where he's been, one color would be where he corresponded to people, or maybe people lived there that he was associated with possibly, or traveled there.
Or they traveled here.
Or they traveled here, maybe more so, yeah.
There's a couple of companies around that wanted his advice and offered to put him on a payroll for just his advice as like efficiency expert. Anytime he felt anything was wrong, we just let him know, and they'd come to him for advice anytime and so forth. So he used to do that. He was on the payroll of a couple of companies like the Charles P. Limerick Company and Holland Furnace. And he would, for quite a few years, just knows he would be on their payroll and advised him. Like one afternoon, he says, Dick Van Raalte was head of it. He bought the Limerick Company out. He says, get him on the phone right away. So called him and got him on the phone. He says, your main power unit, he said, shut it off, there's something wrong with it. So, of course, Dick ran down, he called down, he said, shut the power unit. It was a big power unit and steam, and there was a flywheel almost as big as round as the ceiling here. that ran this belt, and it would run all the power all the way down the whole line with all the power unit. So the guy ran off and pulled the switch, and the thing was, of course, was going just, you know, I don't know how many, 100 RPMs a minute. And it started to slow down and slow down, slower and slower, and just as it got about halfway down, the wheel came off. If that thing had come off going full force, it would probably went right straight down
the line, yeah.
line. I don't know how many people it could have killed.
Holy cow.
And they turned it off, and no problem. Put it back up, fixed it, and repaired it. No, it just showed his capabilities.
1911 he built it, so I believe it was that Christmas that he brought his mother here,
Okay.
and she knew nothing of it.
Okay. And she came from Chicago or something like that?
Kalamazoo.
Kalamazoo, okay.
And Uncle Art told that story very well.
Well, I'll tell you, he was up in his office doing some writing, and he imagined his dad came in the door. And his dad, of course, had been dead for many years. And he had his police dogs laying down there, and he looked at the dog, and the dog never moved, and he says, "It's my imagination." So he went like that, and the dog looked up, and he says, "Well, it's got to be my imagination." So then he tried to perceive what was going on. And he felt like his dad said, "Son," he says, your mother is very unhappy. And if I were alive, I'd build her a little house of 3 rooms where she could have for her own and live the rest of her life. Would you do that for her? And Dad says, "Yeah." I mean, in his mind he thought, "Yes, Dad, I'll do it." So he called down, and he says, Charlie was there, and he said, "Charlie, hitch up the horses. We're going to make some cement, make some mocks, going to build a house." He said, "What?" And he says, "Yeah, we're going to." He says, "Let's get ready." He said, "I'll be down in a few minutes." So, of course, we were young then, but we helped him, and we made the cement blocks to build his house. And it's up on the side of the hill, house of 3 rooms, all cement, overlooking Lake Michigan. And we finished it the day before Christmas. His mother was coming Christmas. So his mother came there, and we sat down and talked a little while, and they'd had a chicken and everything in the stove up at her house, and a dinner and everything already up there. And he said, "Mother, come on." He said, "I want to show you some up on the hill." And she said, "Oh, Joseph, why don't we wait? This is kind of cold now." He said, "Why don't we wait till tomorrow?" "No," he says, "I want to show it to you tonight." So she said, "Okay." So we took her, and of course took our hands, led her up top the hill, and led her into the house, and she looked around. "This is yours." She sat down like that. She almost fainted. And she said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And she said, "I can't believe this. I can't believe this." She said the 1st of August, which was the time that he felt that his father came in, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I went to church. And she says, "I prayed to your dad. If he was alive, he would build me a house of 3 rooms where I could live by myself." And there it was.
You spent the remainder of your life here.
Right, okay. And then the back addition you said was the print shop.
Later added on, it was the print shop where they did the printing.
So after the grandmother died, then this became more of a print shop, or was just more living accommodations for different people?
More of the office area for the print shop. Later on, Bill Percy lived here.
Okay.
And now I live here.
Okay, right. And then Bill Percy would have been?
Grandpa's secretary.
And here we are. Hey, great view from up here. Looking out towards Old Channel Inn, yeah. Actually, we're standing here, this is the chapel.
This is the chapel.
Okay. And this had access to, where were the steps?
The steps were through where the trees have been dropped,
Okay.
and that explains the windedness we have right now.
Right,
So,
okay, okay. All right. And then the study's over there. Library's behind us. Grandma's house is over there.
Yes.
And then this wonderful vista down over Sadony Bayou.
Beautiful view, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing how that has all just filtered in. I mean, you see early shots where there's like, it's filled with logs
Yeah.
floating, and now it's
Back
just,
in the logging
it's
days.
all silted up. Yeah, fascinating. And then, Joe, you live over there in the trees, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, say, there's Joe, you married Martha,
Yep.
and have
2 children,
named Art and Joe.
Joseph and Mary.
Gotcha. All right. Also, I don't know who did all the concrete work, the intricate concrete work. I'm looking at this trellis work. I mean, this is kind of amazing.
Grandpa, the people here, did everything themselves.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
And then here we go with a hello. Okay, well, I mean, just realizing that you looked for some detail, and all of a sudden we see Peter, Petrus, stands for
Peter,
Peter.
one of the disciples.
Right. Okay, gotcha. Right. Saint Peter. He could have gone down, 5 football lengths that way on level land, but somehow he chose to build up here in the slope.
Yeah.
And then when you're up here and you look down there, you can understand why he built
The
up on
view,
the
close
slope.
proximity
Yeah.
to the house.
Yeah.
Then you got the climb, but
They
Yeah.
also, the pond basically ended there, and they had a bridge that went across to the other side.
Okay.
So for access with boats, which they used a lot in those days,
Okay.
and they came up, like we told you earlier, into the little pond area by the garage, and then downstream they'd go.
Well, it's right. When you're kayaking, you can see some pilings down there.
That's where the bridge went across.
That's where the bridge
Okay.
went across.
Would that have been an extension of like the road that goes by the mouse
It
school?
was a footbridge, or all horses went across.
Oh, okay.
Horses and things, yeah.
Because you see your also earlier shots where there's cows or something in the valley kind of thing. Have you seen those? It's like,
Probably in some
okay,
old
some old photographs. Yeah, I've seen, yeah. Okay. All right, well, let's cut over to the library then. Pretty wimpy knock there.
Bet you never seen a set of knockers like that before.
Yeah, you got it. Knock, knock, yeah. Here we go. As we talked about, there's a book called The Life of Christ,
A lot of religious books.
the Lutheran Encyclopedia. And then this was the original one, right?
This was the original library here.
I think that sort of tells a story about book collectors. If you collect, all of a sudden you need more shelf space, right?
Yeah.
Interesting here, this is like the great artist was Jack de Frege. We've always wanted, we've always wanted to do a show on Jack de Frege. But he, great 1930 kind of graphics. And he did those ones of the race people to Art Sadony, the greatest Ebo skipper, ever created kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like this, yeah, right.
Atlantic, the Nemesis, which was our boat.
Right. As a matter of fact, this is a different one because basically the one I have this is up in this corner. But what's interesting is that obviously Clarence Pitkin was a great patron of his and got him to do a lot of work for the yacht club. Mm-hmm. And so like Babes is Clarence Pitkin's boat. As you mentioned, Nemesis is the Sadony.
Sadony boat,
It's
yeah.
and that's an A boat.
That was an A boat.
38 feet.
Yep.
And then the Atlantic, this is an incredible story. We made this a feature boat for Celebrate White Lake a few years ago. The Atlantic was something like about 104 feet long schooner owned by Ike Uline, who owned Schlitz Brewery. And he sailed so often from Milwaukee to White Lake, he became a member of the White Lake Yacht Club. And coincidentally, like Schlitz beer was a favorite beer that was served at the yacht club. And
See, I didn't know that story.
yeah, as a matter of fact, it's all written up. I think it's like page 354 in Looking Aft the book. It's a footnote. What's wonderful about it was that, like,
Dan Yake's book, right?
yeah, and which I worked on with Dan. And anyway, there's the Atlantic, and somehow Dan had it going. The patriotic thing was that you donated your sailboat to the war effort in World War II, and so Uline donates this to the Coast Guard. All right. And then, coincidentally, what happens is that Jack DeFrega, who's been teaching also a sailor at White Lake Yacht Club, he ends up joining the Coast Guard. And so it's like Jack DeFrega's here at White Lake, the big boat comes in, it's like, holy moly, where do you get a boat like that, right?
Right.
And so then Uline gives this to the Coast Guard. They drop the spars, they take it down to the Caribbean, and they loved sailing ships because basically they didn't burn petrol, no gas, and they were quiet. And they could detect the submarine because the Germans were sinking ships along the eastern seaboard in the Caribbean, all right? Yeah. And so we thought that somehow that maybe went down. But later on it came back. It went back to Uline. He gave it to Texas A&M. Texas A&M... actually, Tristan Schill helped me with some investigation on this, and we tracked down the guy. He lived in Lompoc, California. He's done a book on his dad, who was the captain. Anyway, Jack DeFrega ends up being the executive officer on this boat, and this guy's father was the commander. And it sailed around the world about 6 more times. It helped people get out of Vietnam.
Wow.
And then it was going to be the lead ship in the... in 1976, Statue of Liberty number, America, but a couple months before or a year before, something happened below the waterline. Something blew up and it sank. But I mean, that's the story of the Atlantic. Just an amazing story.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And then also just the graphics, different Sylvan Beach and Murray's, things like that.
Jack DeFrega, we met through friends that we had in Grand Rapids. Dad was associated with this group, and they hired this Jack DeFrega. He was from Spring Lake, and he was having a bit of trouble and stuff, so he came up and he didn't have any place to really stay, so he wanted if he could stay with us. So he came over and he stayed with us for a couple of years, several years.
And your father, of course, took him in. You all took him in.
Just took him in, and yeah, of course, whatever we did, what he did with us, and
Yeah, he was quite the artist too.
he was a good artist. That's what he was. What this company in Grand Rapids hired him for designing and doing things. He was very good.
How did he start doing the maps? Do you remember how he started with that?
Well, I don't remember exactly what started, but we was talking about this lakes. Different lakes didn't have the maps and all, and he thought, well, it would be a nice promotional thing to do, and so he just started doing it. And of course, we had drawing boards and everything over there. I used to.
So let's start out with the main house. Okay, the main house was there, and then...
Well, earlier we walked out back. That is where the old barn stood.
Okay,
Beyond that was the old house, which is gone.
the old brown shingle, right?
This is the original part of the library, which
Okay.
we're in right now.
Right,
Was later added onto,
okay,
which is the other portion of the building. Chapel and great-grandmother's house.
okay. And then the main house down here,
And the main house down below with the garages, the second garage, that's also gone.
okay. There's a log house there?
And the log house, there's the small log house, the one we moved up the hill.
Okay,
The big log house right there, that's long since gone.
okay. And then the other thing is that also down, like Indian Bay, okay, Indian Bay, we get back to the property, which is where the lab was,
Right.
the boathouse.
Boathouse.
Also, I just noticed, like, here's the, obviously, White Lake Yacht Club champion, 1931. That'd be the Nemesis, wouldn't it?
That would be the Nemesis.
Yeah. And then the old channel going on and old channel in down there. Sand time, time, justice, okay. Yeah, DeFrega was very clever.
We have the library. They're all cement blocks that we made the blocks ourselves. With gravel we dug up and then made the buildings. We had 32,000 books in there. The library, I've sold about half of them because they were deteriorating and then wanted to get the good books out of there.
Yeah.
So I sold them and divided up with my brother before he passed away. And so there's still 17,000 books in there, in his office, of course.
I found a walking stick. I wonder why there's a walking stick here.
And this came off the gate coming up to the library, which was right in front of the door.
Oh, okay, okay. And that would have been copper originally, right? It's
Copper,
all
of course,
turned
they
green.
made that here too.
Yeah, patina. Yeah, interesting. Gates of the Mind, because that's the book
That is what they named
that
the
was
book.
published after the Joe Sadony died, right?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, a story about the shipwreck and a lot of interesting stories.
Well, we were in the storm one day. We had some company. Jack DeFrega was there and some other people from out of town. And we'd take a walk down the lake. We got out the lake and Dad said, He said, I can see right off in that direction. He says, a 5-masted schooner, he says, that the sails are being ripped and their boat is sinking and they're going to go down. And as Jack DeFrega said, I don't know of any ships that big left there, he says. Well, that's what it looks like to me. And, well, I should have told you previously, Captain Moore, who lived in Whitehall, and he was out to see Dad one time. And Dad talked to him, and he was sailing for quite a while, and he was captain on the ship. And Dad says, you ever play your hunch? He says, once in a while. You listen to your hunch, he says, and you will get a Congressional Medal of Honor for saving some people's lives. If you listen to your hunch, he says, you will do it. And he says, well, boy, I'm going to listen to him if that's what you say. He says, because that's an honor that very few people get, and I don't know if anyone's ever got it on the Great Lakes. He says, you will be capable of doing it. He said, just listen to your hunch. He says, and I'll try to build up that if I can and help you with it. But he said, just remember that. He said, you get a strong hunch. He says, don't cast it aside. He said, believe it. Well, that was the year before this other thing happened. So I'll go back to where he was on the lake. And Dad said, well, he says, I can see them. They're going to go down. He said, well, will they all lose their lives? And Dad says, no. He says, I can see a ship, he says, to the right of it, like a big cigar. He says, if the captain on that ship listens to his hunches, he will go in the right direction and be able to save those people. And of course they were, oh gosh, that's exciting. He said, we'll have to watch it here, see what happens here. Well, it just so happens that this schooner, 5-masted schooner, my son, the last 5-masted sailing ship, was sailing in this storm and ran into trouble. Captain Moore was on this ship that looked like a cigar ship. And he was coming down this side of the lake, and they were on the other side of the lake. And all of a sudden, Captain Moore says, I'm going to go to the right. I'm going to go across the lake. And his mate says, what? Into this storm? He says, you're crazy. He says, put about. He turned the ship, and he headed right straight across the lake into the storm. Across there, and after, I don't know how many hours, they sighted this ship in trouble. and he headed for him. And he said, they can't launch the boat, the waves and the sea was so big they couldn't get a boat off and anything. So Captain Morris hollered through the megaphone. He says, get all your men on deck. He said, I'm going to ram you midships. And when I do, everybody crawl over the ropes onto my boat. He said, you'll never get this boat off in this seas. He said, everybody be ready. So he came up the boat like that, and all the guys came up on deck, and he came up like that, and he crashed right into the side of the boat, run up, and he had his net down in front. 7 guys climbed out of the boat. The old My Son sunk right there and went down. And he saved all 7 people.
That's incredible.
And he got a Congressional Medal of Honor for it.
Did you ever hear this play?
I don't remember hearing this play, but I'm sure.
Looks
I
like
might have at one
it's
time.
still workable. Yeah. It's still got the belt and everything.
Cranks there.
Yeah.
See, this one is correlation of motion of the universe and magnetism. Some of his research he did. Cabinet number 3, drawer 4. Joseph Sadony writings.
Jack Bursey was a guy who was an Antarctic expedition guy. I think he was with Byrd, right? Wasn't it?
Admiral Byrd,
Admiral
yes.
Byrd, right?
Dad had a man that was Mayor's Byers that was a graduate student from 2 different colleges. And he came up and he lived with us for many years. Up Dad. He was from California. And he stopped off to visit us. We met him out in California. He stopped off to visit us and spent a week there and came back and stayed about 20 years. And then we, of course, we studied engineering and mechanical drawing and French and English and all that stuff we took through him. And we had regular classes every day.
We're sort of ending up here in the library. It's amazing because there's like phase 1 of the library and phase 2. We're in phase 2, and anybody who's collected books know that you never have enough books. And I think what's so interesting about the Valley of the Pines is that somehow it starts out with, Professor Joe, the family, the movement, the collection of people, the buildings for this, the creative energy in radio, the creative energy in black light. It goes on and on and on, and that somehow, besides the physical building, we've seen the manufacturing of concrete blocks. We've seen the chapel with the concrete trellis, very unique buildings, creating things here, and that somehow we end up in the library, and the library basically is kind of the intellectual aspect. And so you have, the endless array of books. And what I think is also curious about, years ago, I came to a book sale here, and you were amazed at the amount of books that were being carried out. But obviously, still here are all the remaining books, and that somehow they all tell stories, I should say, of basically the professor's mind and where it went in his writings, and that as you look around with the lights, etc., you also see, the totally modern electronic kind of surveillance protection system that's in all the buildings. And so, not only do we have the past, but also we have the modern electronic system of detecting movements in buildings and things like that. So it's an amazing collection and an amazing place, Valley of the Pines.
I think the most remarkable, the most outstanding thing was his desire to help people and to make things better and to help the downtrodden or anyone that was in trouble. And to do it, he didn't have the money to do any, like financially, but he says he would help them to do it for themselves. It means more, he said, if you do it for yourself than if I give it to you, it's gone. Right? It's like the old thought, if I give you a fish, you eat for the day. If I teach you how to catch fish, you can take care of yourself for the rest of your life.
1947?
I'll stay still as I can. Wow.
July, Miss July.
How you know supposed to think of that thing?
Come on, Joey. Joey, this is our music. That's us off. Brings back memories.
I've got my love to keep me warm.
Probably didn't realize it was so deep since I dug it out.
Hey, Sadie, what's going on?
A little early for a Saturday night bath.
What a dog.
Poor dog. Poor dog.
Oh, ouch. Yeah,